A wildfire burning near the town of Yarnell, just south of Prescott. The Tenderfoot Fire ignited Wednesday evening, a human-caused blaze, destroying more than 3,300 acres in 72 hours. Evacuations ordered for about 300 people, crews say as a precaution. More than 240 personnel fighting the flames from the air and on the ground. A heavy response. 3 years ago, Yarnell still reeling from the 2013 wildfire that claimed the lives of 19 hotshot crew members. Wildfires in Arizona. This is Arizona Week. Hello, and thanks for joining us. This is what's known as Altar Valley. Southwest of Tucson, just north of Mexico, it's a Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge.
The refuge here is about 118,000 acres. It was established in 1985 for the purpose of protecting and managing semi-desert grasslands, as well as endangered species, with the emphasis on the masked bobwhite quail. It's a highly endangered bird. We have the captive flock that we have on refuge is comprised of about 99% of the entire species. It's just a beautiful, unique place, removed from the city, wide open public land for anybody to visit. Because this was an old ranch, there is a big network of roads for people to travel, and they are all public roads. We have a large hunt program in conjunction with Arizona Game and Fish, and so a lot of hunters come down here. And also, it's a very popular bird watching refuge.
Over the next few months, the refuge will look a bit different. On Tuesday, crews set fire to this part of the refuge on purpose. Biologists and firefighters say prescribed burns are critical for the landscape and the wildlife. But prescribed burns like this one are controlled and managed under the right condition. Wildfires, however, are a different story. Earlier this week, I met the Rio Bravo hotshot crew from the Sequoia National Forest in California. They had just returned from helping contain the Mule Ridge fire burning near Nogales.
We're the Rio Bravo hotshots. We're a Type 1 crew out of Kern County, Lake Isabella, California. A 22-man crew. We stick together for about 9 months out of the year. Live right out of the trucks that you see behind me. Spend a lot of day and nights, a lot of hours together and away from our families.
What kind of person is a hotshot? Can you describe yourselves to me?
Sure. A hotshot has to have a lot of pride, a lot of willpower to take on the tasks that we do. Extremely physical person, being able to hike for hours and miles in some of the roughest terrain that a lot of people don't enjoy or won't go into, period.
When you get the call to come to Arizona, how do you prepare yourselves for that? Because the climate, the geography is different than what you see in California.
The way we prepare ourselves for anything in the nation, we want to prepare for the worst conditions that we can encounter anywhere. While we're at home, especially some of the hottest days that we can get, is when we choose to go out in the heat of the day to do practice cuts, to pretend like we have fires out there, and to put our saw teams and all our toolers in the worst conditions to have the best outcome when we go out on assignments.
Why do you do this kind of work? What is it about it that makes it doable?
It's very rewarding. Anybody who likes to be in the outdoors, this job encompasses so much. People ask what do you do? And I get to fly in helicopters, camp out in some of the most rural areas. I get to fight fire. I get to see a lot of country that people never get to set foot or eye on.
There's an element of danger to what you do.
Correct.
How do you process that for you and your guys, a lot of young people, young families?
It comes with the experience. A lot of our rookies that come on depend on the more veteran guys to look out for them. They definitely follow us when things get hectic. And it's just about being calm and learning to process all the information that comes to you and to learn and know what your surroundings, what's going on around you, to stay safe every day.
Today's an off day so far. You're not actually fighting a fire. So what's the crew up to?
Today is our 14th day out of our trip. Tomorrow we head home, so the guys are still at work. They're gonna clean all the trucks, make everything spotless, and we're still on duty today. We're still covering this area. So they're gonna make sure the tools are still up to par and ready to go on any given moment.
Then there's that bittersweet feeling of heading home.
Yes, tomorrow is a big day for all the guys. Everybody's got their own exciting things to go home to. Me personally, my family. I've got 4 kids and a wife and pets at home that are waiting for me too. A lot of the guys on the crew also have wives. They're married, have kids, and just family, mom and dad to go to. Tomorrow, definitely more sweet than bitter.
Tell me about the camaraderie of this bunch. What is a daily activities like for you guys? There's a lot of gentle ribbing among the group of brothers.
Yeah, we have our good days and our bad days. We're so tight-knitted we can get through so much. When one guy's down, the next guy's ready to pick up with whatever he's having trouble with, whether it be personal, physical. We really back each other up in every aspect, being out here, and even off duty and at home. The first thing we can do as soon as we get home, everybody wants to go see their family, but somehow the next day we all end up back together, barbecuing, doing something. We're right back at it. So.
And these trucks, as you said, are your temporary home when you're out in the field.
Correct. You know, we forewarn a lot of the guys when they come on to take the job is that you're going to live in that box for the next 9 months. You know, they get their little cubicle in there, and that's basically their little locker room there to take care of that and keep it clean. And all our food, water, it all comes out of that truck, and we take care of those so they can take care of us.
You guys all really believe in what you do.
Yeah, we take a lot of pride in going out and helping our communities with protecting them, along with being available to the nation to do so also.
That firefight for the Rio Bravo hotshots was on the Coronado National Forest. In the last 6 months, the agency has put out more than 30 wildfires throughout southern Arizona.
Well, it was predicted that we would have an active wildfire season this year, and it certainly has materialized.
Hotter, drier conditions, is that what's fueling this?
Fuel is the key word. We have a lot of fuel buildup, especially at the lower to mid elevations, a lot of what we call fine fuels, which are the grasses and brush. They are cured out now, they're dry, they're ready to burn. All we need is an ignition source. Additionally, we're seeing active fire behavior at the higher elevations as well. So really, we are in full swing as far as fire season goes this year.
Why is the higher elevation particularly worrisome?
Well, there's a lot of excess fuel, and we saw several weeks ago a fire in an area that had a lot of deadened down wood, deadened down logs, which really retained a lot of heat. And so it took quite an effort to get that fire to the point where it wasn't going to spread anymore.
We think summertime, we think wildfire season, but that's not true in Arizona anymore.
We are in wildfire season year-round. 2015, our last wildfire was in December. 2016, our first wildfire was in January.
So how does the Forest Service prepare differently?
Well, there are some things that we just do because we anticipate that we're going to see wildfire. So we have our permanent crew that's on, and in the spring everybody gets qualified. We bring our seasonals on, everybody's trained up, qualified. We bring on additional aircraft that we have under contract before it really starts getting hot and dry. So those resources are in place. And then when we start seeing fire activity, normally we are burning before other areas of the country are, so we haven't really had a lot of trouble to order the resources that we needed.
The first wildfire was in January. Here we are in June. How many wildfires have we seen at this point?
This calendar year we've had 35 wildfires for over 30,000 acres.
Is that significant to you?
It is. Something that's significant is we're seeing fires start and grow to thousands of acres in a single day. We were seeing that in March, and that's fire behavior we don't typically see until April or May. So things were really rolling along early in the season for us this year.
Does that create some sort of anticipation for what we might see in July or even August?
We are anticipating more of the same, and fire behavior could really increase as the temperatures get hotter and the humidity drops.
What sorts of resources does the Coronado National Forest have ready to go?
We have fire engines and crews on every ranger district, on each of our 5 ranger districts. Additionally, we have the 3 helicopters that are on contract, and then we have aircraft, additional crews, equipment such as bulldozers and so forth that we can order if needed.
A lot of these wildfires are man-made. What is your message to the public?
Any human-caused fire can be prevented. We are trying to get people to think about what are you doing that could start a wildfire, because all it really takes is something to light something, an ignition source for a fire to start. So the obvious things are campfires. Build it in a safe place. If it's windy and you don't need one, don't have one. And if you leave it for any reason, make sure that it is completely out, cold to the touch. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't do when they're planning their outings is they don't plan to take extra water for putting the fire out. I think a lot of folks will, when they're packing up, getting ready to leave, if there's extra water, if there's leftover water, they'll throw it on the fire. But they really need to think about taking enough water to extinguish that fire every time they're going to leave it. And what that means is drowning it with water, stirring it, and repeating that process until you can put your hand right over it and not feel any heat. Other things that can start fires that people might not be thinking about is if you're going to be pulling a trailer, secure your tow chain so it doesn't make contact with the roadway. Don't weld outside on a windy day if you can avoid that. Don't park your car over dry grass. Even a lawnmower blade striking a rock can create a spark, so people just need to be aware of what they're doing and make sure they don't create that spark that starts a wildfire.
Scientists study drought and climate change as they relate to wildfires, but these dry desert conditions and fire behavior are becoming more unpredictable.
So when we look back in the past record, we see that the biggest fires have always happened in June, early July, before the onset of the monsoon. The reason for that is we have to ask what makes a fire spread, not what starts it. That's usually lightning or a campfire, but why do fires spread? And that comes down to a combination of temperature, humidity, and wind. And when those 3 things are lined up, you get big fires. Well, what's happening right now in the Southwest? Record high temperatures, humidity is below 10%, high winds, fuel moistures, the fine fuels that carry a fire, those fuel moistures are in the 3 to 4% range. That means that the slightest ignition carried by those winds and those high temperatures can really move fast, and that's why we get such big fires in this month.
We hear tinderbox a lot for some areas of our landscape. Is that being overly dramatic, or is it entirely possible that some of these places could light up?
We used to think that there would be a gap between a big fire and the next time that area would burn, but in recent years we've discovered that areas are reburning, sometimes within 5 to 10 years. And so really we look at the whole landscape and we think about it from a fuel perspective. We understand that big fires can happen anytime, and especially when the weather conditions converge, those high winds and high temperatures and low humidity, that really is the key, and that can drive fire through fuels that are 10 years old or 100 years old.
In the past, you've said fire can be a good thing. It is a good thing. Can you help explain that again?
Fire is not only a good thing, it's an essential thing for ecosystems throughout the western United States. Fire is one way that ecosystems breathe. They recycle their carbon and their nutrients and their biomass. Fires regulate water, they regulate wildlife habitat, but those are the fires that used to happen in the West for thousands of years. And the kinds of fires we're seeing now are the result of our having tried to exclude that for so many years. So we've kind of built up a dam, and now that dam is breaking and we're getting these huge, much more destructive fires. That doesn't mean that ecosystems won't recover, they will, but they may recover into something different from what we grew up thinking of them as being. In particular, we may see forests after these big fires being replaced by shrublands where there are very few trees. That'll still be an ecosystem, but it's a very different kind of system from what we had just a generation ago.
Climate change, the drought, is that a part of this?
Climate change is absolutely part of the fire situation in the western United States, and we simply can't look away from that anymore. We've always had the variability from year to year, and we've always had seasonal variability. Again, May, June, big fire months in the Southwest as far back in the historical record as we can see. What we're doing is we're turning up the crank on those factors that make fire spread. We're turning up the temperature crank. The spring seasons are often drier, winds are higher, and so the things that cause fires to spread and get big and destructive, climate change is amplifying those. So I would think of it as there is a historical pattern that's always been there, for thousands of years. Climate change is amplifying that, and it means that we'll still have fires in the peak fire season, but they're likely to be bigger and more dangerous and harder to control.
This week there is a prescribed burn. That's important for this area right now.
Yes, so prescribed fire seems like such a paradox at this very moment when fire is scaring us out of our pants. Why would we want to put more of it on the landscape? But the fact is that those prescribed fires, which can be done under controlled conditions, are the best way to return fire to the landscape and reduce fuels. And in fact, they're the most cost-effective way we can do that. Suppressing big fires costs tens of millions of dollars and often leaves a devastated landscape. Prescribed fires cost a fraction of that and can be done under controlled conditions, and all the public land managing agencies know how to do it safely. And that is really our future if we can increase the amount of prescribed burning during the right season.
El Nino did not turn out to be what we had hoped for this year, but it did impact the landscape in our area.
Yeah, El Nino may not have produced the rain that we wanted for our rain barrels, but it did a great job of growing fine fuels. If you go up into the mountains today, you'll see a lot of grasses and forbs and shrubs. Those are the fine fuels that carry fire. And so it turns out that this winter was enough to stimulate that fine fuel production, and that's part of why fire managers are really being cautious, because now we have the fuels out there. And remember what a fuel is. It's just a package of energy waiting to be released.
The Chiricahuas, the Catalinas, even the Mogollon Rim have had significant fire damage over the last 10, 15 years. That doesn't mean they're safe this summer.
Not safe at all. We used to think that once a mountain range had a big fire, it was kind of out of the picture for some number of decades. That turns out not to be true, and the reason is the way these ecosystems are recovering. They're coming back with a lot of shrubby fuels and a lot of grasses. Well, shrubs and grasses burn really easily. And shrubs in particular burn with a kind of explosive character, very different from forests. And so, unfortunately, even though these areas have had big fires in the last decade, the fact is they could have big fires again. That's also because even during a big fire, you end up with a mosaic of areas that have burned severely and areas that have hardly burned at all. And so even in 2004, the year after the Aspen fire and the Bullock fire the year before that, even then there was still plenty of fuel in the Catalinas ready to burn. So I think we have to start assuming that the mountains would be capable of carrying a big fire in pretty much any year. The fuels are there, and the weather is really going to be the factor that triggers that.
This is desert vegetation. It's adapted to arid conditions. However, it's getting really hot and dry here now, and you can see the grasses are drying out. Some of the desert other vegetation, the brittle bush and the triangle leaf burr sage, is really tinder dry. It'll crumble in your hand. And it is so dry, there's no moisture left in it. When we have rainstorms come through, it brings us temporary relief, but what we really need is significant moisture, significant rainfall to really help bring us out of the drought. Individual storms are temporary relief. Looking around, you can see other skeletons of cholla that are upright. The prickly pear are getting really dry. Some of them are starting to die. Some of them have died. All of this is evidence of extreme dryness. So when we get to this point, all we need is an ignition source and these plants will burn.
Spotting smoke is one of the most critical yet difficult jobs when it comes to wildfires. Arizona Public Media's Zach Ziegler takes us inside the Lemon Rock Lookout in the Santa Catalinas.
Once it starts getting dark, I like to have finished eating, have everything cleaned up, and then I read or correspondence with family because this is isolated. I do not have television up here. I do have internet. I do have Sirius XM radio, which is nice to be able to listen to music. But you know you're going to get up early the next morning, so you at my age you want to get to bed early.
Mac Tippins left his home in South Carolina in April. By June, with the 2014 fire season 2 months old, he was quite comfortable in his new home at Lemon Rock Lookout in the Santa Catalina Mountains north of Tucson. The length of his stay and the length of the season itself are based on the risk of fire.
And that will be defined by the monsoon. How long it lasts, how wet it is. Will it be August 31st? I don't know. Will it be September 15th? I don't know, but somewhere in that range.
2014 was Tippin's first fire season at Lemon Rock Lookout. He spent the previous 5 seasons in Oregon's Deschutes National Forest.
I had a 3rd grade teacher who used to chide me for looking out the window. I did send her an email a couple of years ago, and I said, I remember you chiding me for staring out the window, but I just wanted to tell you I did become an airline pilot, and I did look out the window a lot in that job. And I am a fire lookout now, and that's one of my primary responsibilities is to look out the window. So,
the 15 by 15 space is filled with the tools of fire spotting, as well as some basic amenities to allow the lookout to stay at his or her post for days at a time.
Running water, hot and cold, electricity.
Tippin spent the summer watching for puffs of smoke in the large stretches of Coronado National Forest that are visible from Lemon Rock.
We refer to what we see from the lookout as a smoke, as opposed to a fire, because normally you don't see any flames. The primary tool in almost any fire lookout is going to be this instrument here. This is called an Osborne Firefinder. I'm going to align this vertical.
The firefinder allows the spotter to find the exact direction of the fire from the lookout, often called the azimuth.
That azimuth, which is a true azimuth as opposed to a magnetic azimuth. I put this compass rose directly over the dot that is Lemon Rock Lookout, and then I pull the string out to the azimuth that I had determined, reading it on the compass rose, and I'm going to look out at the terrain features that crosses and find the feature that best matches what I'm looking at.
A variety of maps can come in handy in the terrain of the Santa Catalina Mountains. Once a rough location is determined, the lookout can call in the smoke to the dispatch office.
Okay, thanks, and tell Dr. I'll give them the position, the smoke characteristics, any pertinent weather at the fire, wind, lightning, that kind of thing that might affect a crew or might affect a decision to dispatch a crew.
Once the crew is heading towards the fire, Tippins will begin to refine the position using modern technology.
Depending on how much time I think I have, I will probably go over to another important tool, and that's the computer, the internet. Okay, LRLO is Lemon Rock Lookout.
Tippins uses Google Earth to double-check his work and to get a coordinate-based reading of where the smoke was spotted so firefighters can locate it using GPS. But the work doesn't end when the fire is spotted and located.
Over the pin, 32 degrees, 25. As far as my responsibility on that particular fire that I've reported, after I have given them an initial position and perhaps a refined position, then I have a responsibility to keep watching it, determine any changes in smoke characteristic, weather, fire characteristics, or that type of thing. There's a whole lot of satisfaction in spotting a fire, spotting a smoke, and getting a crew on it, and that crew gets on it, and they say 2 things. They say it's right where the lookout said it was, and they say it's a spot fire, less than 1/10 of an acre.
While the work comes fast and furious when fire is spotted, those moments were few and far between this season, thanks to the strong rains that came at the start of the monsoon. So Tippins spent those slow moments by taking pictures of the unbelievable sights on Mount Lemmon.
I did get some interesting shots as far as to see what it looks like from the lookout, and occasionally you can get a shot with the camera outside. What I'm considering the best photo of the season was on Memorial Day, and there was a lot of drift smoke in the air from a fire north of us. It was striated, it was layered, and the sun was rising in that striated smoke. And then, of course, Tucson itself down there just is a bejeweled masterpiece from that elevation at night. These roll clouds would come in they would hit that steep slope coming up the rock, and it would come whooshing up there, literally whooshing, and you could hear it coming through the pines, and then the temperature would drop.
Those fast-moving clouds were a sign that the monsoon had arrived.
In the lookout, you are in the storm. You are in the lightning, and it's popping all around. It's popping below you, above you, behind you. First strike is kind of, that's the dam bursting, because it's usually going to come fairly intensely after that. Sometimes it gets so close that you just, the pucker factor gets real high. You just find somewhere to sit and say, okay, this shall pass. A lot of times you would be enveloped in the clouds and lose all your visibility. And then the lightning's extremely interesting, because then it's just blinding, amorphous. You don't know what direction it's really in.
Once you have had lightning move through and you start the whole regime of looking for smokes from lightning fires, time moves faster than at any other time in the lookout.
Tippins didn't see any large fires this season in Lemon Rock Lookout, thanks to the wet start of the monsoons.
Well, in a word, the season was short, which I guess is good. But I will tell you this, it could have been the other way. If we had had lightning, if the monsoon had come in dry, with a lot of lightning and not a lot of precipitation, we would have been in trouble. But, thank goodness it was wet.
Mac Tippins traveled back to South Carolina in early August. He'll return to Lemon Rock next spring.
Wildfires are devastating to lives and landscape. 3 years ago, near Prescott, the Yarnell fire took the lives of 19 hotshots. Join me the week of July 1st for an interview with Brendan McDonough, one of the Yarnell hotshots.
June 30th, until my brothers died, there was nothing different about it. It was like any other day of firefighting.
And that's our program. Next week, the drought in the Southwest. Arizona Week travels to Lake Mead. For all of us at Arizona Public Media, I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us.